The conspiracy is real.
It seems to spread like a contagion, doesn't it? One person's fear becomes the next.
Oh, what a bleak, horrible future we live in!
Don't you mean present?
Right, present.
Deus friggin' Ex. Pioneering immersive sim, innovative fusion of genres, amazing soundtrack, occasionally cringe voice acting, but often positive as being one of the greatest video games of all time. But Deus Ex is also a milestone in the history of the conspiracy thriller. Join us now on a journey from the 1950s to the 2050s, spotlighting the year 2000, a crossroads in the changing relationship between conspiracy thrillers and pop culture. Welcome to Quantum Geek.
Country, the land of the noble free, thy name I love.
Back when the age of Hollywood dawned, conspiracies were a relatively rare focus of early movies. This was thanks in large part to something called the Motion Picture Production Code, more popularly known as the Hays Code. Wanting to prove that Hollywood and motion pictures were not some den of iniquity, about to lead American moviegoers into a world of sin, and wanting to avoid the possibility of government regulation, the film industry resolved to censor itself, with a fairly strict and prudish set of guidelines drawn up by the Movie Producers Association president, William Harrison Hays. Among its stipulations, the Hays Code said films couldn't portray authority figures as baddies, or if corrupt politicians or cops were depicted, it had to be made clear that these bad eggs were very much the exception, not part of some wider cabal of Machiavellian bellends. Even foreign governments were largely protected from being shown as conspiratorial, since the code said, "The history, institutions, prominent people and citizens of other nations shall be represented fairly." However, the get-out-of-jail card here for conspiracy thrillers kind of hinged on the represented fairly part, because it meant that if there was broad enough consensus that a particular nation, its ideology, and its agents were in fact sketchy, then making them the villains could be seen as fair. So as the Cold War began, and particularly as the paranoia of McCarthyism kicked in during the 50s, conspiracies on film and television would have one consistent architects: the Soviet Union, the commies, the Reds under the bed, pinkos, old Marxist face. Sometimes this might be represented metaphorically, as was the case with the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956, where fears of Soviet infiltrators, sleeper agents, or card-carrying communists on the DL were represented by aliens and their pop people clones. Other examples were much more literal, with films like The Manchurian Candidate, or TV and radio series like I Led 3 Lives and The Man Called X, portraying communist plots against America. Far from challenging authority, therefore, these early conspiracy-centred films were practically a propaganda arm of government. As the 50s and 60s rolled on, though, Hollywood increasingly had to compete with both foreign movies and the increasing number of TV-owning households. And the narrative constraints of the Hays Code were making American movies look insipid and naive in comparison. By the mid-60s, the Hays Code was increasingly being ignored, and it was finally revoked completely in 1968, in favour of the modern system of instead certificating films with a minimum age limit.
This is gonna make a great story.
As the 1970s dawned then, the gloves were off, and making politicians, corporations or public institutions the arch-conspirator baddies was now an option. Classic exemplar of the dystopian sci-fi genre, and also of the Charlton Heston shouts the bombshell revelation at the end subgenre, Soylent Green depicts corporate interests colluding with an oppressive government to cover up feeding humans to other humans.
Anyway, can I get you some Soylent Green?
Isn't that made of people?
Oh, here we go.
And the 70s would also feature revelation of several real-world conspiratorial activities: the Watergate scandal, the Tuskegee experiments, the CIA's MK-Ultra program. The mistrust all this shenanigans engendered resulted in a slew of conspiracy-based films, including All the President's Men, a dramatisation of the uncovering of Watergate, Capricorn 1, riffing on the moon landing hoax theories, and Hangar 18, depicting an Area 51-style repository of alien tech. Perhaps the most enduring source of conspiracies, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, was depicted in 1991's JFK, blending the conspiracy thriller with a legal procedural, and portraying numerous real-life individuals, including Kevin Costner playing conspiracy investigator Jim Garrison, JFK blurred the line between drama and documentary, inviting the viewer to embrace the film's central conspiracy as a factual account. Garrison's character kind of breaks the fourth wall and talks directly to the film's modern-day audience, saying, "In the court of law, we hope against the odds, to nail Clay Shaw on a conspiracy charge. In the court of public opinion, it could take another 25 or 30 years for the truth to come out, but at least we're going to strike the first blow."
The world didn't end.
No, it didn't.
So as we reach the early 90s, the Cold War is over, and with it dissolved the hyper-partisan, rally around the flag, them versus us worldview that had prevailed in the Western world for the past 50-odd years. It was fertile ground, therefore, for a TV series that questioned government's agenda and transparency. In September 1993, The X-Files began a 9-year run. It would be a trailblazer in mixing serialized and episodic storytelling. It would be memorable for cutting-edge effects and prosthetics, and for the Scully effect in causing a measurable increase in the number of women joining scientific, medical, and law enforcement professions. It would be inspirational in its inventive ways to shoot episode after episode in the same tiny-ass section of Canadian woodland and claim it was actually a different part of America. It would fill cumulative hours of screen times just through the dialogue exchange of its two main characters phoning each other and saying, "Scully, it's me," and then, "Mulder, where are you?" At its height, it would achieve a viewership of 20 million households per episode, making it the highest viewed show on the Fox network at the time. The X-Files' central mythology was built around a government conspiracy spearheaded by a group of old white dudes collectively known as the Syndicate. Having known for decades about the existence of extraterrestrials, but hiding this from the public, the Syndicate had effectively waved the white flag for the human race, and become collaborators with a race of alien colonists. The colonists intended to turn humanity into a slave race by deploying a sentient black oil, which can enthrall a host body within a matter of seconds. Although it did have the unfortunate weakness that a spooky screensaver effect will also appear on the host's eyeballs immediately before or after delivering any evil one-liners. For good measure, the government of the X-Files verse would also do a few cheeky side conspiracies, like sleep-depriving NAM veterans, weaponising the digital displays on microwaves and elevators, and broadcasting ultra-low frequency radio waves that make your head explode unless you're travelling consistently westwards. Plus, bees. They love those bees. Throughout the 90s then, the X-Files helped curate the disparate, fringe ideas that had made up the conspiracy theory landscape of decades past into a coherent worldview, where a certain amount of paranoia was a healthy reaction to government misdeeds and cover-ups. It also made conspiracy theories kind of cool, fun even at times. Recurring characters the Lone Gunman, who would brief to get their own spin-off series in 2001, provided comic relief as well as occasional assistance to Mulder and Scully. In the Season 6 two-parter Dreamland, even one of Area 51's malevolent Men in Black is transformed into a somewhat regular Joe comedic character when he and Mulder are body-swapped by alien technology. And this was part of a wider trend of sanitising conspiracy theories, turning them into harmless fun. The Men in Black movies present a playful war in the shadows between the memory-erasing, bug-bursting, pug-shaking MIBs and Earth's cartoonishly wacky extraterrestrial adversaries. 1997's Conspiracy Theory presents Mel Gibson's fantasist cabbie as its lovable hero, despite him violently biting off Patrick Stewart's nose and spending much of the film obsessively stalking Julia Roberts. The late 2000 Simpsons episode, The Computer Wore Menace Shoes, pokes fun at early internet conspiracy theorists and riffs on the 60s conspiracy-driven series The Prisoner, as Homer inadvertently reveals a plot by generic New World Order types to drive people into frenzies of Christmas shopping through mind-controlling flu jabs.
Please forgive my unexplained 2-week absence. To make it up to you, we will go out to dinner at a sensibly priced restaurant, then have a night of efficient German sex.
Well, I sure don't feel like cooking.
This is what I was made for, isn't it? This is why I exist. All right, let's do this.
So, by the year 2000, the stage was set for an opus that could combine all the myriad conspiracy theories in the popular consciousness into a single arch-conspiracy. Deus Ex. Set in the year 2052, God-complex-afflicted billionaire Bob Page, formerly a member of the Illuminati, leads the shadowy, deep-state cabal Majestic 12 from his bunker in Area 51. Majestic 12 aims to create a new, totalitarian world government, in league with evil megacorporations like the big pharma giant VersaLife. VersaLife has created a man-made virus, the Grey Death, while simultaneously producing the only vaccine, Ambrosia, hoping to leverage control over the population through limiting the availability of said vaccine. Majestic 12 also employs a cohort of elite Men in Black as enforcers, and periodically unleashes genetically engineered monsters into the sewers. Page's key ally within government, Walton Simons, is the director of FEMA, which stands ready to implement a state of emergency and imprison thousands of Americans in camps. Page and Simons also control the United Nations Anti-Terrorist Coalition, through their stooge, UNATCO director Joseph Mandley, an agency with little accountability and access to stealth tech black helicopters. Secret bases are located inside or underneath every prominent landmark, sometimes with secret bases inside other secret bases, secret baseception. The player takes on the role of newly minted UNATCO agent J.C. Denton. Denton is effectively a kind of super soldier, augmented with nanotechnology to give him enhanced abilities. Arguably one of the first uses of what would become a trope in popular media of using nanotechnology as this kind of hand-wavy magic that could do whatever the plot required. So, some actual Deus Ex Machina there, I guess. Initially, the player is oblivious to the conspiracy's existence, and the game rewards you for completing UNATCO objectives, primarily anti-terrorist missions against the National Secessionist Forces, or NSF, an outgrowth of the militia movement. As the game progresses though, Denton uncovers the Majestic 12 plot, and the player is ultimately given a choice as to which alternative to Bob Page's world domination Denton will help bring about. Destroy the global IT networks to return to a simpler world with small agrarian or artisan communities, merging with a sentient computer system to create an impartial, incorruptible, but paternalistic and omnipotent AI overlord, or forming a new Illuminati, aspiring to be an enlightened oligarchy, subtly but incessantly nudging and corralling humans to keep them in line. The plots and themes of Deus Ex weren't only about conspiracy theories though, and we can see many of the hopes, fears and obsessions of the turn of the millennium weaved into its world building. An obvious one is human beings' relationship with technology. The Y2K problem dominated the headlines in the late 90s, bringing into sharp focus the potentially perilous dependency of modern civilization on computers and communications technology. And it's hardly surprising that the people of 2000 might have expected this societal dependency to soon extend to a physiological one. In June of that year, Peter Houghton of Birmingham, here in the UK, became the first person to receive an artificial heart, the Yarvik 2000. That's one intended for permanent use rather than the previous beta versions, which had all been designed as a stopgap solution only. In fact, Deus Ex's predictions about body augmentations would later prove something of a self-fulfilling prophecy in the 2010s when Tilly Lockey, also from the UK, would receive bionic arms, having lost her limbs to meningitis as a baby, which were designed as replicas of the ones protagonist Adam Jensen has in the Deus Ex prequel games. The growing power of corporations, particularly tech giants, was also topical in 2000, which was the peak of the dot-com bubble. Legal proceedings against Microsoft that started in the late 90s culminated in 2000 with a US court ruling that the company had violated anti-monopoly laws and would need to be broken up into two separate businesses for its software and hardware arms, although Microsoft actually managed to negotiate its way out of this breakup in the following year. Surveillance cameras are everywhere in Deus Ex, which is partly an element of the game's stealth and problem-solving mechanics, but also reflects how ubiquitous surveillance cameras had become by the year 2000, with the UK, for example, estimated to have more than 4 million such cameras by the early noughties. Debate surrounded such surveillance and its usefulness in the detection and prevention of crime versus public privacy concerns. But in popular media, surveillance actually became the basis for an emerging genre of entertainment: reality TV.
I don't see anything amusing about spying on people.
Human beings feel pleasure when they are watched. I have recorded their smiles as I tell them who they are.
Some people just don't understand the dangers of indiscriminate surveillance.
Shows like Survivor and Streetmate popped up in the late 90s, and in 2000 the UK became the first country to jump on the franchise bandwagon of Big Brother, which had its inaugural broadcast in the Netherlands the previous year. Also first broadcast in 2000 was Trigger Happy TV, which provided an alternative, more subversive take on reality TV, playfully embroiling unwitting bystanders in its gags, but also satirising aspects of daily life, most notably mobile phone use. The film Battle Royale takes the surveillance fetish to its ultimate conclusion, as teenagers are forced to participate in a televised fight to the death on a remote island. The realism and social commentary were heightened by casting Beat Takashi as the antagonist, Takashi having been a popular game show host in Japan in the 80s and 90s.
I never asked for this.
On September the 11th, 2001, the world changed forever, with the hijacking of 4 planes, the destruction of the World Trade Center, and the loss of nearly 3,000 lives. This, combined with the postal anthrax scares of the same year, and the subsequent terrorist attacks in Madrid in 2004 and London in 2005, meant that terrorism dominated the news and the public consciousness in the first half of the noughties. This substantially shifted the Overton window of who one could portray as the baddies in a conspiracy thriller. with storylines about attacks from an external force now fitting the public mood much more comfortably than maligning one's own government. In America particularly, the Bush administration experienced a surge in popularity compared to its previous declining poll ratings. First broadcast in 2001, 24 featured another federal agent battling a conspiracy, but now these conspirators were foreign terrorists on US soil. The X-Files ratings and critical response had admittedly been in decline for some time before 9/11. The departure of David Duchovny in the later seasons, a somewhat unconvincing attempt to reboot the main mythology, replacing the Syndicate arc with a somewhat limp alien super soldiers storyline, and the general formula fatigue of the Monster of the Week episodes had all combined to erode the X-Files' popularity. However, it was post 9/11 that the X-Files ratings experienced their most dramatic decline. Robert Patrick, who played Agent Doggett in the final 2 seasons before the show's cancellation in 2002, later commented that he felt the Fox network had abandoned their show in a conscious decision to promote the more zeitgeisty 24.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
An even more obvious contrast can be drawn between the X-Files and the series Fringe, which started in the late noughties. In terms of the basic premise, Fringe looked like a fairly blatant copy and paste of the X-Files. An FBI agent investigates various paranormal or scientifically implausible events, with some episodes being Monster of the Week, whilst others tie into a wider mythology arc. But in Fringe, Agent Olivia Dunham and the gang are based within the government task force, which not just investigates and contains these extraordinary threats, but also conceals their existence from the public. In essence, Dunham & Co. work for exactly the kind of black ops outfit Mulder and Scully would normally be working against, yet the Fringe division is almost exclusively depicted as a force for good. Even the somewhat sketchy mega-corporation they regularly collaborate with, Massive Dynamic, is largely forgiven its many sins, with their R&D projects frequently providing Fringe division with the tools to combat this week's mad scientist with sympathetic motives or test subject whose superpowers turned out to be a curse. And like 24, the nefarious conspiracies come again from an outside power, a parallel universe's Department of Defense, and its mirror version of Fringe Division in earlier seasons, and then the Men in Black style observers, ecocidal authoritarians from the 27th century in the final season. During the 2010s and 2020s, the threat of terrorism receded somewhat, but the public's relationship with conspiracy theories would also shift significantly. No longer the preserve of just fringe groups and entertaining works of fiction, conspiracy theories began to be openly espoused by prominent politicians and business leaders. Conspiracy theorist YouTubers or podcasters steadily transformed these ideas into a monetizable grift. With conspiracy theories becoming increasingly politically charged and polarizing, the idea of sitting back and enjoying a work of fiction based around one would come to feel increasingly implausible. Some popular media, particularly TV, where the longer format storytelling might allow for a more nuanced exploration, did try and update the conspiracy thriller for the modern age. The conspiracies shown in Homeland would mostly be by foreign spies and terrorists, but it would also feature members of the US government and military as conspirators. However, it would also deconstruct some of the dangers of conspiracy theories as well. In Seasons 6 and 7, we see an Alex Jones-style conspiracy theorist provoke a deadly shootout, and Russian agents exploiting public willingness to believe in such conspiracy theories for their own ends. The plot of the 2019 Watchmen series includes a common element of real-world conspiracy theories, but one which is generally ignored by fictional conspiracy thrillers: racism. White supremacist politicians and vigilantes plot together as members of the 7th Cavalry, and their veneration of the fallen Watchman Rorschach further muddies the moral waters of a character who was already highly ambiguous in his previous iterations. Here in the UK, a few examples can be found that buck the trend. Pushing back against the rising Islamophobia and terrorism fears of the early noughties, 2005's V for Vendetta shows a conspiracy by a fascist British government who unleashed a virus against its own people to justify their authoritarian regime, and then distract the public with anti-Muslim and homophobic propaganda. The 2013 series Utopia depicts a rogue agency within the British establishment, the Network, manufacturing a deadly virus and then plotting to deploy a worldwide vaccine that will sterilise almost the entire human race. But although a critical success, Utopia was cancelled after 2 seasons. The US version of Utopia was released during the COVID pandemic, which you'd think would make the global virus plotline resonate harder and ride a wave of relevance to rating success, but instead, that version was cancelled after only 1 season. The X-Files, of course, also made 2 semi-comebacks in the years since its main run ended in 2002. Firstly, in 2008, there was the movie I Want to Believe, which notably abandoned government or alien conspiracies in favour of a standalone Monster of the Week style plot. Later, in 2016 and 2018, we got 2 further mini-series seasons. Although these would revive government and alien conspiracies, we can detect a palpable lack of enthusiasm from the writers in those particular myth-arc episodes, a lack of enthusiasm echoed by critics and fans, with the standalone episodes instead being the highlights, particularly the lost art of forehead sweat, which satirises conspiratorial thinking. And lastly, there's the Deus Ex franchise itself, which has seen its lore and universe expanded by a number of further games since 2000, along with a smattering of other tie-in media. And whilst the critical response to this later canon of works is mixed, there is a certain amount of love out there for the prequel games, Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, set a quarter of a century or so before the original. The games do once again feature the Illuminati, FEMA camps, terrorism and grand conspiracies, but this time there's also a cautionary tale about prejudice and injustice, a chance to appreciate the dangers and not just the vicarious thrills of paranoia. In the prequel setting, those who are mechanically augmented are shafted by a lack of access to life-sustaining medicine, vulnerable to exploitation, and generally looked at askance by the original flavour of humans, the naturals. Particularly after terrorist incidents heighten this org-phobia, inducing mistrust of all those who might happen to look like the perpetrators, with the player experiencing this prejudice firsthand through augmented protagonist Adam Jensen. Paradoxical as it seems to use the phrase, we can therefore see the decade from the early 90s up until 9/11 as a kind of age of innocence for portraying conspiracy theories on TV, in film, or in video games, with Deus Ex itself being the swan song of this era. The X-Files had paved the way for a fictional universe in which myriad fringe conspiracy theories of the past could coexist in a single narrative, a concept Deus Ex picked up and ran with, along with weaving into its world-building topical issues from the year 2000, including the dangers of technological dependency, mega-corporation monopolies, and a surveillance society. In the noughties, however, a post-9/11 siege mentality made depicting conspiracies instigated by our own governments seem uncomfortably subversive. In the 2010s, conspiracy theories have become political tools and grifty income streams, making them increasingly toxic and polarising as potential subject matters in public discourse or fiction. Deus Ex's creator Warren Spector recently commented, "I wouldn't make Deus Ex again today as it was in 2000, when it could be read as a believable fantasy." Today, conspiracy theories in media are often readily consumed as realities, typically designed to enable people's worst instincts, rather than entertaining fictions that might still encompass worthwhile questions about the power dynamics between citizens, governments, and corporations. So whilst being a conspiracy theory skeptic, I'm still a sucker for a good conspiracy thriller, hence my love for Deus Ex, and my augmented nostalgia for the simpler times of the 90s and millennium when it comes to conspiracy theories in fiction. Despite the real-world political baggage of the 21st century though, fingers crossed, both the conspiracy thriller genre and the Deus Ex franchise may still have life in them yet. Fictional media of the last decade has demonstrated a capacity to acknowledge and incorporate the dangers of real-world conspiracy theories within their narratives. After all, if this was in fact the end of the road for Deus Ex and conspiracy thrillers, that would be a shame. A rotten way to die.
I absolutely refuse to subject myself to this madness.